Greetings and welcome. You're tuned into TMH's Daily English News. Our headlines for today: the Ethiopian Army shells Tigray Defense Forces position, violating the cessation of hostilities agreement. WHO chief says color of skin may be why Tigray crisis is not getting the attention it deserves. And GSTS makes urgent plea to improve conditions of Tigrayan refugees that are currently in the eastern Sudan region. Our main updates for today: the Ethiopian Army shells Tigray Defense Forces position in northwestern Tigray, again violating the cessation of hostilities agreement. The Tigray Defense Forces Central Command released a statement today saying that the Ethiopian Army shelled its position around Dedebit for 1 hour on Monday, starting at 4 p.m. using artillery and other weapons. The Tigray Defense Forces Central Command took its time to establish whether this was done by the commander within the area or were sanctioned at the higher level. The statement did, in fact, say that was planned and sanctioned from above. The statement also added that by this action, the Ethiopian government has violated the cessation of hostilities that was agreed between the two sides, and which the Tigray Defense Force have been taking high caution to uphold. The Tigray Defense Forces Central Command stated that the government is making it impossible for the government of Tigray to reclaim Western Tigray peacefully, making a military means to do so as the only way out. The statement also warned that the violation of the cessation of hostilities by the Ethiopian government is based on wrong calculations and that it would reignite war and lead to a total disaster. The Tigray Defense Forces Central Command added that the Ethiopian people, political, and the whole Ethiopian army in general should understand that the Ethiopian regime that declared war on Tigray and committed genocide and all of these atrocities on the people is solely responsible for such a turn of unfortunate development and turns. In a related story, Getachew Reda, member of the Tigray Armed Forces Defense Force Central Command, said that the Abiy Ahmed regime has made it abundantly clear that it has no appetite for peaceful negotiations except as delaying tactics before it can unleash yet another round of genocidal campaign against the people of Tigray. He ends off his Twitter post by saying this madness needs to be stopped as soon as possible. As we move on to our next update, WHO chief also says color of skin may be why Tigray crisis is not getting the attention it does deserve. The WHO World Health Organization Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus has suggested that racism is behind a lack of international attention being paid to the plight of the civilians in Ethiopia's war-shattered Tigray region, calling it the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. With 6 million people unable to access basic services, Tedros questioned in an emotional appeal why the situation is not getting the same attention as the Ukrainian conflict. Maybe the reason is the color of the skin of the people, said Tedros, who is from Tigray originally and told virtual media briefing on Wednesday, and that in April this year at a briefing also he questioned whether black and white lives in emergency worldwide are given equal attention. WHO Emergencies Director Mike Ryan also hit out an apparent shortage of concern about the drought and famine that's unfolding in the Horn of Africa and ensuing health crises in general. No one seems to give a damn about what's happening in the Horn of Africa, said Ryan, speaking at a virtual meeting briefing on Wednesday. The WHO called for $120.7 million to tackle the health problems resulting from growing malnutrition in the region, and where around 200 million people currently live and millions are going hungry and injury unattended as well. The Global Society of Tigray Scholars and Professionals has made an urgent plea to improve conditions in refugee camps for Tigrayans that are currently languishing in eastern Sudan. GSTS released a statement expressing concerns regarding the deteriorating life conditions within the camps as expressed by the refugee communities. GSTS said the food basket as well as the quality of shelters and services have gone from bad to worse. And again, according to GSTS, the shelters and the camps continue to succumb to wind, fire, and flooding, with significant negative impacts on the health and general well-being of all of the refugees, particularly of the most vulnerable refugees, including children, women, and the elderly. The statement alluded to UNHCR's recent announcement that the monthly rations per person has been reduced by half. While we understand the general food shortage caused by the Ukrainian war, such a major reduction in basic rations will contribute to the further deterioration of the quality of life and the refugees who are already struggling to make ends meet. It particularly expressed its extreme concern that the refugees, such as those in Umrakwa camp, often eat only once a day, as disheartening as that sounds. The absence of adequate health services at Hamdayat and other camps mean that refugees experiencing health issues, including those arising from the harsh living conditions, have no resources or recourse to basic treatment as well. GSTS noted that such difficult conditions of living and the lack of vital and basic services create a ripple effect, exposing refugees to many other dangers, including smuggling and other human trafficking to Libya, other places where migrants are lured with the promise of crossing into Europe only to suffer serious abuses, including sexual violence, enslavement, and even recruitment into military and criminal organizations as well. GSTS called on the UNHCR to improve the shelters, such as that they do not destabilize that already difficult life in the camps for the refugees, and to restore the standard monthly rations so that the nutritional status of children and pregnant and lactating mothers does not deteriorate any further. It also pleaded for expanding access to food, health facilities, sanitation, and mental health services, as well as other humanitarian needs that are indispensable to the survival of all of these refugees. More than 67,000 Tigrayan refugees who fled their homes since the onset of the war on Tigray in November 2020 are being hosted in eastern Sudan currently. FAO fertilizer is being used as another weapon to cow the people of Tigray into submission. An Italian news outlet, Ferroti Roma, reported that Abiy Ahmed's regime is using an underhanded method in the purchase and distribution of UN-funded fertilizer to increase pressure on the government of Tigray to accept an unconditional surrender disguised as a peace agreement. The UN and the National Central Emergency Relief Fund has funded and approved about $10 million to FAO to increase the supply of fertilizers to support farmers in the region of Tigray. And of the 31,000 tons of fertilizers that FAO purchased, only 7,000 were distributed to farmers within the Tigray region. The rest lie in warehouses within the Addis Ababa, capital of Ethiopia, as federal government is preventing them from being sent into the Tigray region in all of possible ways. Even the amount of distributed so far serve as a red herring for the federal government to demonstrate its generosity in helping the population of Tigray and for FAO in order to apply for additional funding. Ferroti Roma wrote that Tigray government, democratically elected in September of 2020 and still in office currently, has not been involved in either the fertilizer purchase or distribution process except marginally. According to the Italian website, again, this is a clear political choice made by FAO in order not to irritate the Addis Ababa regime, which is out to punish the people of Tigray currently. FAO bought the fertilizers through Ethiopian government. Sources from the Ethiopian civil society report that the purchase was made in opaque circumstances and the suppliers chosen from Ethiopian firms belonging to the Amhara and Oromo entrepreneurs nearby or an integral part of the government who would have applied prices higher than those on the market. The United Nations agency and its partners have so far procured just over 19,000 tons of fertilizer, or 40% of what they need. An additional 12,000 tons were purchased through CERF loans, along with a similar allocation by the FAO. This support must be delivered and applied by the end of August. Rain Paulson, who's the director of FAO's Office for Emergencies and Resilience, stressed wider implications. He says, there is a small window of opportunity to prevent severe hunger by providing critical agriculture inputs and allowing farmers to produce enough food for the population, thereby preventing a potential increase in this ongoing humanitarian crisis. According to the website, distribution of fertilizers will not solve the hunger problems in Tigray, as a no action is planned against Addis Ababa regime to end the siege and the humanitarian blockade of the entire region. Many agricultural fields are thought to have been mined, and there's a lack of fuel needed for harvesting agricultural machinery and for the distribution of agricultural products within the urban centers and the road transport. There's no water to irrigate the fields and the electricity to grind the cereals and so on. All of these objective difficulties created by the Addis Ababa and the Asmara regimes are well known to FAO experts, but are not mentioned. Farodi Roma said that there's no mention of the daily difficulties created by the federal government to prevent UN convoys from entering the region under the humanitarian blockade against the Tigrayans. What is more serious is the absolute silence on the ongoing genocide against the Tagaru population, which is orchestrated by the federal regime of Addis Ababa, as they wrote on their article on the Farodi Roma website. Independent researchers found out that between 250,000 to 500,000 civilians have died in Tigray so far, including an estimated 50 to 100,000 direct homicides and 150 to 200,000 starvation deaths, and more than 100,000 deaths just caused by lack of health care alone. Our final update for today, the return of thousands of internally displaced people to Abala town in the Afar region has begun today. The IDPs were displaced from Samara last December in 2021, and the return operation will continue over the next couple of weeks. OSHA did say that it is working with partners to ensure a safe transition for all of the returnees and the thousands of Tigrayan IDPs who were languishing in extreme circumstances in all of these concentration camps in Samara, and there are reports that many were executed and others just simply died of lack of food and medicine as well. The returnees demanded that their safety be guaranteed, as things are not clear enough as they stand currently. That concludes our news for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back with some more for tomorrow. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.